Every tabletop role-playing game has that moment where leveling feels empty. They hit the next number and they gain the new abilities. Maybe they even pocket some loot. And then it's gone because there's no weight or memory. And the worst part, we've all felt it. And that's the crack in the system. And I want to fix that today because if you can flip how leveling works, if you can weave training and mastery into the story, then every single session will matter. And that shift might be the greatest upgrade you can ever make to your game. Because leveling in Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games is broken. And deep down, you already know it. How many times have you been playing a video game? It's past midnight and you're just tired. But you keep saying, just one more fight. Just enough to level up. You want to get that dopamine hit, that little rush, and then you go to bed. And that's fine in a video game, but at the table, that same design is hollow. Plus, Cindy needs to go to work tomorrow, and she doesn't have time for you to level up. Whatever, Cindy, whatever. But you hit the number. The XP threshold ticks over, and suddenly you swing harder, you cast bigger spells, and you can pick tougher locks with no training, no story. But you did get that sweet drip of dopamine disguised as progress. And that's the real problem, because D&D hand-waves the most important part of character growth. It rewards the grind, but it doesn't reward your world. And if you're a DM or GM, this should terrify you, because it means your campaign is built on just shifting sand. Today I'm going to show you how to rip the system out, anchor leveling into your story, and turn progress into the single most powerful and important storytelling tool you have at your fingertips. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Progress. We've all been tricked into thinking experience equals growth. You fight a monster, you get the points. And ding, a new level. And suddenly your character is stronger. Dungeons & Dragons, almost every tabletop role-playing game, has run in this loop for decades. But it's not progress. It's just the illusion of progress. So bear with me. Think about it. In the real world, if you swing a sword 1,000 times, yeah, you're going to get stronger. But that doesn't mean you wake up tomorrow with brand new combat techniques baked into your DNA. It takes a teacher, and it takes failure, and it takes a crap ton of time. It takes training. But in D&D, you just kill enough goblins and suddenly you unlock extra attacks. That's not growth. That's a slot machine dressed as character development. And that's why campaigns start to feel hollow, because the dopamine rush of level up replaces the gravity of story. You felt it. Your players have felt it. That moment when the only thing anyone cares about is how close they are to that next ding. This hijacks the table. And that little rush, it's addictive. That same psychology that keeps you grinding in a video game at 2 a.m. is sitting right in your tabletop role-playing game's leveling system. But the story doesn't get better and the characters don't develop and your world just doesn't really matter because all that really changes is the information on the sheet. And if the campaign is built on that, you've built a pretty hollow foundation because when the rush fades and there's nothing left to remember, so they just start chasing the next dopamine dump. And that's where the fallout begins. When leveling is just numbers on a sheet, everything else gets kind of cheaper. Players stop caring about your world and they stop paying attention to NPCs and cities and history. Why? Because in reality, none of it really matters. The only question on their mind is how much XP do I get for this? I've watched it happen at my tables. We lay out a mystery, a kingdom on the edge of war, a building the layers of schemes. But all my players want to know is how much experience points they're going to get for fighting this or that. The story becomes background noise while everyone waits for the next dopamine hit. And this trains your players to chase candy instead of chasing meaning. They learn that actions only matter if it moves my XP bar up. and that failure has no weight because there's always another goblin around the corner to farm. You know, the fastest way to get stronger isn't through role play or choices or sacrifice. It's through grinding and killing. This is the poison that all DMs fear. Because at that point, you're not building a world anymore. You're running a treadmill. You have become the XP dispenser, not the storyteller. And once your players see that, your campaign is kind of doomed. Think about your favorite memories at the table. Were they about hitting level 5? No, they weren't. They were about that desperate decision, that brilliant trick, that risk that paid off, or that failure that left scars. Those are the stories that stick. And yet the system we use teaches us exactly the opposite, that the story is just the wrapper, and the real candy is the leveling up. It's a fallout. A table full of players who don't lean in, a flat world that doesn't breathe, and a DM or game master who feels like they're just babysitting that stupid chart of XP. Chapter 2, Rebuilding, Leveling into Story. So how do we fix it? Well, we stop handing out levels like candy, and we stop letting a chart dictate how our characters grow. We have to eliminate our players asking, or at least wondering, how much their actions are worth. Kill 5 goblins and we get X amount of experience. We need to start weaving our leveling into the story itself. And I'm not saying that gaining hit points when you level doesn't make sense. You've survived, you're tougher. You've pushed your limits. And we'll cover that later on. But new powers, spells, or skills, those should not be granted for free. Those need training and knowledge. You didn't one day wake up and you were a biomedical equipment engineer. There is a great story about how I got there. They want to cast higher magic, so have them track down a wizard willing to share the secrets. Maybe it's time for your fighter to master new combat techniques. They need a teacher to train them and show them what it really costs in blood, sweat, and tears. Maybe it's time for your thief to perfect her skills. Have them find a rogue who knows the tricks and pay whatever price they demand. That's how you flip leveling from a treadmill into fuel for your campaign. And suddenly the Rogues Guild really matters. And that monastery up on the mountaintop, it carries some weight. And that forgotten library? Well, it's not just a set dressing anymore. It holds a lifeline of ancient tomes and techniques. Think about what happens at the table when you run it this way. Every new level is tied to a person, a place, or a sacrifice. It's your present weaves, giving things more weight. Players start chasing story instead of the math. They have to pay attention as they dig through your world. Because now the world bends under what they want, not under that XP chart. Leveling stops being a dopamine hit and it starts being a story engine. Every new ability becomes a badge of who taught them and what did they risk and what were they willing to leave behind. That's what makes campaigns unforgettable. And it's not that ding and it's not that chart. The story of how they earned it. Chapter 3, Training, Masters, and the real way to level up. Here's how everything changes, because if you tie leveling to your story, you don't just fix this problem, you fix a lot of problems that plague most tables. You unlock the most powerful tool in Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing game campaigns. You need content? You have it. Also, if you need a twist, you have that also. Your players can't afford burning the world to the ground because that rando, snotty person might be the key to future knowledge. Think about martial arts. You don't just walk into a Japanese dojo, throw a few punches, and get handed a black belt. You drill, you fail, you wait until your master says you're ready. And sometimes you get to wait years. And that's what makes that belt mean something. Personally, I like the way the Chinese martial arts does it a lot better. There's only 3 levels. Student, Teacher, master. You train, and when you're ready, you get a little more information, a little more knowledge. Your character should learn levels the same way. A level should not be a dopamine hit ever. It should just be passing with no fanfare and just part of the story. Being ready to learn is not the same as learning. That difference is where the story lives. A cleric doesn't just unlock a new spell because the XP chart says so. They return to the temple, they serve, they sacrifice to be judged worthy of greater miracles. New rituals to unlock potential within their order. The thief doesn't just wake up with new skills. They need to find a guild, sneak into the right company, barter, lie, steal with a master rogue for the secrets of the trade. And try not to get killed in the process. Your fighter doesn't just start swinging harder. They need to seek out a knight, a mercenary, or even a rival who can show them new techniques or a form. Then they need to practice it under direct tutelage while learning the real cost of combat. That's story and weight. Building your campaign's gravity. The moment your players realize that they just don't ding to the next level, they'll lean in. They'll start asking a few more questions. Or maybe they'll chase a wild rumor. They'll follow and watch NPCs because now every step of their growth is hooked to the world you built. There's a great old saying in Chinese martial arts. When the student is ready, the master appears. When the master is ready, the student appears. That's how D&D and tabletop role-playing games leveling should work. Character growth is only tied to the story when it collides with the preparation. Not when charts say, "Congratulations, you have killed enough orcs or enough goblins." Dungeon masters and game masters, this is how you make campaigns unforgettable. Tie progress to training, to its mentors, to the fact that there is always a risk. Because when a level up has a face, a name, and a price, your players will never forget it. And if you need proof this works, just look at the stories we already love. Colonel McLeod. He doesn't become immortal in Highlander without Sean Connery's Ramirez shaping him, pushing him, teaching him the cost. Daniel LaRusso doesn't win in Karate Kid without Mr. Miyagi breaking him down and rebuilding him through patience, repetition, and discipline. These characters didn't just level up. They trained and suffered. And because they did, they earned it. That's the blueprint your campaign should follow. Chapter 4. How to do it at your table. Okay, I've stated the problem with leveling is that it's treated like a light switch. You hit a number and suddenly you're stronger. But your table is made up of a party and they're all together. One character doesn't walk away from months of training while everyone else sits idle. So how do you keep that sense of growth without breaking the flow of play? And the answer is kind of simple. You tie training directly to the adventure. The fighter's lesson, the cleric's devotion, the wizard's practice, all of it happens in the middle of the story. And all of it pulls the rest of the party into the moment. The fighter's teacher isn't just handing out lessons. They're a force in the world. When the party arrives, it's not just the fighter who's tested. The master demands that they all take part because training one warrior means binding their companions into the same cause. Maybe the monastery won't open its gates unless the whole party agrees to carry the same burden. Maybe the mercenary company refuses to teach unless the party signs on to help with one of their jobs. The fighter's growth drags the others into oaths, debts, and enemies that will follow them long after the training is done. What started as a lesson in footwork becomes the turning point in the story. The campaign shifts. The master's war becomes their war. The guild's rivalry becomes their rivalry. The fighter doesn't just come back with sharper skills. The whole party comes back with new scars, new ties, and new threats chasing them down. The cleric's path isn't about walking into a temple and getting handed more power. Every step forward comes at a cost. And it ties back into your campaign. The trick is to treat training like any other part of the adventure. Never, ever frame it as downtime. Frame it as story. The master is an NPC with motives. The guild is a faction with its own goals, and every step of progress pulls the group deeper into your campaign, not away from it. Training should always carry risk, consequences, or choice. The knowledge is just a line item in the story. It's not a cutscene or a reward screen. The mercenary teaches the fighter might be working for your villain. The temple that grants miracles might demand obedience that splits your party's loyalty. The guild that sharpens the rogue's skills might pull them into debts they can't ever easily repay. Growth is never free, and the cost of learning becomes a story. When the fighter finally learns that new technique, it shouldn't feel like a sudden burst of power. It should feel like the end of a long road of bruises, mistakes, and lessons paid in coin and or blood. When the cleric calls down a new miracle, the table should remember the nights of doubt and the price of devotion that led them there. When the rogue perfects a new trick, it should carry the weight of practice, failure, and maybe even betrayal. Leveling isn't meant to be fireworks. XP is just a trackable placeholder of hard work that it took to get there. These abilities are just tools. The memory of how it was earned, that's what matters. When you run it this way, no one is sitting out. No one is waiting for someone else to level up. Everyone is part of it because every lesson reshapes the adventure they're already on. That's how you do it. Tie training to your world and make it dangerous, make it political, and mostly, make it cost something. Let the whole party share in the price and the payoff. Because when a new ability finally clicks, it won't feel like a number ticked on a chart. It'll feel like a chapter of the story they have all lived through. Chapter 5. The Split. Hit points and knowledge. How every new skill drags the whole party deeper into your world. With oaths, debts, enemies, and scars. That alone is enough to turn leveling from the number grind into fuel for your story. But there's another step, and this is where I think it really gets good. Because when training is part of your campaign, leveling can still feel flat if everything comes all at once. This is what I call the split. And then it changes everything. Because our books treat leveling like a big bundle. You hit the XP mark and suddenly you're tougher, you're faster, and more skilled all at once. But that's not how growth actually feels. And it's why leveling loses weight. The fix is simple. You split it. Hit points or survival, and give those right away. If a fighter has been through enough battles to crawl out alive, of course they can take more punishment. If a wizard has been burned and cut and nearly drowned, their body is harder than it used to be. That part makes sense. So let them have it immediately. Everything else is mastery, and mastery doesn't just happen. Extra attacks, sharper skill, new prayers, higher spells, those need to be earned. They need a teacher or a trial or a moment in the story that unlocks them. A fighter doesn't just swing faster because they didn't die. They swing faster because a master showed them a form and drilled it into them. A cleric doesn't automatically call down bigger miracles because they hit a number on a chart. They do it because their God demanded sacrifice first. So here's how it works the table. When players level, you let them roll hit points right away. They feel stronger. They see the change. But the abilities, those stay locked until the story gives them a way in. The XP open the door. The story is what gets them to actually walk through it. And the beauty is players don't feel cheated. They already got something real. But they also know there's more waiting. And the only way to reach it is by leaning into your world. Suddenly they're going to start asking about temples and guilds and rival mercenaries and how to find old scrolls. Because now they're going to suddenly care about the NPCs. That's the split. Survival now, mastery later. It gives the story fuel, it gives their growth weight, and it keeps everyone leaning forward instead of just waiting for the next tick up. Chapter 6, The Hollow Adventurer. Leveling should never feel complete the moment the dice hit the table. A character with more hit points but the same skill is dangerous in all the right ways. They're tougher. They can stand longer in the fight, but they haven't earned any new abilities. Because when you split survival from mastery, you create tension that every DM and GM can use. A character can have the hit points of a veteran but still fight, cast, sneak, or prey like a novice. That unfinished edge is the whole point. It's what makes growth matter. Picture what happens when a player levels up. They roll their new hit points and immediately feel stronger. They know they can take more punishment. They know they won't drop as fast. That's survival. That extra attack, the next spell tier, the divine blessing, the sharper techniques, it's still out of reach. That gap between survival and mastery is what gives you leverage as the game master. It's not about punishing the players. They already got something real. They're tougher. They're more durable. They're more confident in the fight. But they also feel the absence of the thing they really want: knowledge, skill, and perks. That absence pushes them to act. It pushes them to look outward, to lean on the world. And that's where you step in as the DM. You can show that desire or want through the world around them. Rivals point it out, NPCs exploit it. Their own failure reminds them of it. The fighter can stand longer on the line, but they can't press that attack. And the thief can dodge death much easier, but they still kind of suck at opening locks. Survival gave them toughness. Mastery is what they're still missing. Handled this way, the gap doesn't frustrate players. It drives them. It keeps them hungry. They already feel stronger, but they know they're not finished. That constant pull keeps them leaning into the story instead of just staring at a chart. And when mastery finally arrives, it hits because it was earned. Those aren't just numbers. They're memories of the moments your table will talk about years later. That's the hollow adventurer. Tough enough to live, but not yet sharp enough to grow. And it's not a flaw. This tension makes leveling a story instead of a transaction, and it's what keeps your players chasing mentors, temples, guilds, rivals, until their survival and mastery finally come together and are the same. Chapter 7, Uneven Growth and Party Levels. Not everyone grows at the same pace, and that's a good thing. Different classes already have different thresholds. A thief climbs faster than a wizard because their path is different. A fighter pushes through a different wall than a cleric. That spread is part of the design. Not everyone at the table earns the same number of XPs for the same act. A thief who picked 20 locks should feel that in their growth, while the cleric who carried the weight of a hard decision should feel it also. Progress is not linear. It's not 20 XP across the board. One might get 2, one might get 25, one might get 10. The point is to reward engagement, roleplay, unique problem solving, the thing that makes a character alive in the story. Nobody should know what level anyone else is in the party, unless that player chooses to share it. Your level is your secret until you want it revealed. Maybe the thief hides how far they've come, holding back until the right moment. Maybe the cleric downplays their strength, waiting for the trial that will prove them. That choice to reveal is story fuel. It creates mystery, pride, and even a little bit of jealousy at the table. This means that your party will always be uneven. And that's the point. The spread should always hover around 3 levels, give or take. Close enough that nobody is hopelessly outclassed, but far enough apart that everyone feels distinct. One character might be 3 levels of survival and 2 of mastery. Another might be 4 and 4. Another might only just be starting their training. The spread is the texture of your campaign. Everyone's climbing, but everyone's climbing on their own, at their own pace. Don't fear this imbalance. Lean into it. Uneven levels make the party feel like a real group of individuals instead of 4 identical sheets ticking up together. It gives you tension to play with, and it gives you the players secrets to hold or reveal, and it makes every new level feel earned. Sharper because it wasn't automatic and it wasn't synchronized. It was personal. And that's the party you want, a mix of survivors and students and hardened veterans and hungry novices, all carrying different lessons and different scars and their own messed up, stupid baggage. Together they're a party, but never equal. And that imbalance is what makes them interesting. Conclusion. Leveling has always been treated like a number grind. XP ticks up, powers unlock, and the story bends around a chart. That's why so many campaigns feel hollow. The growth ends up on the sheet instead of in the story. It doesn't have to work that way. Split survival from mastery. Let hit points rise when the character survives another fight. But hold back that real edge of growth. Those belong in the world itself. In that rival guild that demands a price, the temple that won't grant blessings until a sacrifice is given, the mercenary who teaches for blood and coin, a tomb hidden where others died trying to reach it. When progression comes through the world, a level isn't just a ding. It's a scar, a teacher, a debt, a choice. It turns the middle of your campaign into more than just a grind. And the longer you run it this way, the more those scars start piling up. They shape the whole arc. The shaky first levels, the desperate middle stretch, and eventually the final climb. Leveling this way doesn't just change how your players grow, it changes how the campaign itself grows. And when you finally bring it to a close, the ending won't feel like it's just bolted on at the end. It will feel like the only way all those scars and lessons could come together. And this is why this matters. And that's what comes next. The next video is about ending our campaign the right way, carrying all that weight forward to give your table a finale that feels final, epic, and so unforgettable. Because this kind of story belongs in the Worn Below, a place built on scars and memory where survival by itself is never enough. A place where the fluffy spawn claw their way out of the dark, sharper, a little bit stranger from what they have endured. That's what your players become when they run leveling like this. Not numbers on a chart, but living stories marked by the lessons they fought to earn. So step into it. Split survival from mastery and let your table descend to the Worn Below, because that's where unforgettable campaigns are born.